Good morning, buenos dias, guten morgen, and guten Morgen. I hope I said all that right, but that remains to be seen. Did want to point out, because it's a lift we're very proud of, that's a cantilever bar at the end of the hook on that crane where we did an off-center lift and dropped chain falls down 85 feet. And it was nominated for Rigging of the Year job in America. We didn't win, but we were still very proud of the job and like talking about it. I don't really like talking about myself, but when talking about our journey through incident and injury-free and what we're trying to accomplish within TNT and the industry overall, it's kind of hard to not focus on where we started out. And so when I put together the transaction 10 years ago to buy TNT, there were three tenets that I consistently have said over the last 10 years that we're going to run the company on, and that's safety, service, and respect. And from a safety standpoint, everything goes into that, but most importantly, keeping, our people healthy and returning home every night just as good as they came in. Service, there's hustle, there's technical know-how, there's having the right cranes, there's the attitude of the operator. A lot of things go into that. And then respect is not only treating the customers with respect, but also treating each other, the employees, vendors, et cetera, with respect. And if you take care of those three, everything else takes care of itself. And notice that I didn't say profits or anything like that in there, because if you do those three, you're going to get more work than what you can handle. If you do it consistently every day, you have a good attitude, you do your work safely, you hustle and do that, everything else takes care of itself. And from a personal standpoint on safety, starting that out as number one on the first thing that we needed to focus on 10 years ago, I'm a little bit of a annoying person from that standpoint, I guess. My wife will definitely back that up, but I'm the guy that goes into a restaurant and the guy's standing on the top rung of a ladder changing a light bulb, and I'll stop him or hold the ladder or say he shouldn't be doing that, spotting. I'm the guy at work that will go in and stop something because somebody doesn't have a hard hat on or what have you. I'm the guy that, when we're driving somewhere, if you're going too fast or following somebody too close, the other thing, and this is kind of a pet peeve, I love when you're riding with someone and they're turned while they're driving and they're talking to you. And I'm like, I'm not going to look at you, so why don't you not look at me? Look out on the road. We're going 70 miles an hour here and you're engaging in this conversation. And it kind of got to be a joke, but also a point. If one of my branch managers knew that I was going on a ride along with one of our sales guys, he would be like, look, don't follow anybody too close. Don't look at Mike when you're driving. You're going to get in trouble. It's a problem. And so, as I said, it could be annoying to some people, but it also is. I'm trying to highlight my passion for safety, and then that's where we started out 10 years ago. Now, one thing that this says is that this is commitment-based safety. When you look at your agenda, it says behavioral-based, and it's completely different, and I will highlight that in a little bit. So in 2003, and I did see a pointer up here somebody used earlier, but let's see if I can figure that out later. In 2003, when I started, we had 3 branches and 55 cranes and 1 safety professional and roughly 200 employees. Now, I didn't do this on a regular basis because it's not efficient, but there were multiple days where I could be in Houston, San Antonio, and Corpus and touch all 3 branches, in a single day. You have to do it in a truck. You can't make the flights work. And there are days, honestly, I miss my little 3-branch company. That is for sure, because things have clearly changed. This is us now. We've acquired 11 companies. We've opened up 6 branches greenfield. We have 42 locations, 675 cranes, 1,500 plus employees, and we have 30 HSE professionals now. So we went from 1 safety professional and 55 cranes to, we've improved that ratio quite a bit. And so it's been, I've got on there, I think it's, with 675 cranes and you do the 30 HSE professionals, that's roughly 1 for every 20 cranes, where an HSE professional can basically go out and touch every crane every week, if he can just hit 3 or 4 a day. And some of that started in our first acquisition, which was in Corpus Christi in 2008. And we had the 1 safety professional, and we were adding 22 cranes through the acquisition. And the jackleg investment banker says to me, he goes, well, what about if we got rid of the safety professional that's coming with Kuhn Crane, and then that'll be a cost savings? And I'm like, where are you going with this? And he said, I'm trying to figure out how we can make a little more money and you pay us more. And I said, we're about to have 38 cranes in Corpus Christi. That's not, we have to have a safety person there, and we probably need to add an additional person on top of that. And so the point being is that back in 2007, 2008, 2009, we started putting a lot of resources in, and we always felt like that was important. Many people would go in and do turnarounds in refineries and petrochemical plants, and they would bring in outside consultants. And we've always just felt like we want to have enough people to cover all of our turnaround work, and then they can go out and do audits and training at other times. And so it's always been a big focus and resource investment for us. But along with that came a lot of different issues. You know, when I had the little 3-branch company and went right around, you knew that there were different cultures in the different branches. I mean, frankly, there's different cultures within crews. You know, if you've got 30 cranes running in Houston at the time, then you kind of have 30 little microcultures, and everybody's different, and that's fine. And with many of you also having a large number of employees, when you have 1,500 employees, you have some goofballs and some weirdos and people who do silly stuff. And so, you try to work through that as long as they're working safe and doing the things that they needed to. You had different processes and systems. You had drastically increased exposure. But one of the things that always bugged me is we didn't really have the right safety culture. We didn't have, you know, we would talk about it, we would do the right things, you'd try to set the right tone, but the bigger we got, personally, the less impact I felt like I was having. I mean, I generally fly 200,000 miles a year. I don't hit every branch every year, but I hit the major ones multiple times a year, and you still just can't have that much of an impact just trying to drive around, and you'll see how that changed with where we were going. So this slide is meant to be confusing. This is what we call our North region. So you have TNT in Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana. You have Southway Crane. We've kept the brands in many of the places. You have RMS in Colorado. But this is the North region of TNT. And I will try briefly to see if this is the pointer, but, well, I'll just point it out. The branch on the far right is Longview, and it came from Turner Brothers. In the middle there is Dallas-Fort Worth. Out at the left edge is Midland, Odessa. Up in the top corner of Texas up there is Amarillo. It's really in Pampa. And then in Oklahoma you have Ratliff City, and you have Oklahoma City. So TNT started up Ratliff City in around 2010 or 11. We acquired Turner Brothers in 2012. We acquired Americrane in 2008. We acquired TSD in 2013, and we acquired Rent-A-Crane in 2014. So you have 5 different cultures from different companies. Okay, I will get to use the pointer real quick. And they're all within this region, and they don't even like each other. Many of these guys were competitors, and you know, and what did they continue to do as all this came together? They continued to compete, and it would drive me a little nuts. And you'd sit them in the room and say, okay, you guys are successful in many respects because you're type A personalities. We have this little square we're sitting around here. I want all of the type A aggression focused out that way, not inwardly toward this table. And we would literally have guys take a crane over here in Longview, Texas, and run right out past Midland and go do a job when the Midland branch is sitting right there. And then you get into the conversation, don't do that. And when we started kicking off IIF, it was amazing the way the team came together, but I just wanted to give and make a point on how messy some of this was with as fast as we grew. But even with that, we were getting all the different safety awards, and we were doing extremely well. You know, one particular very prestigious award in Houston, Texas, the Houston Business Roundtable Safety and Excellence Award, you can only do it every other year, and we won basically every time we were nominated. And one of the reasons that they did every other year, and they told us this, is they're like, otherwise somebody like TNT would just win all the time. And there was frankly a little bit of, as this went on, we started smoking our own dope and saying, you know, we are really that good. We would receive the Texas Mutual Award, and they would just go on and on about how much better we were than everybody else. And we just thought that was really great. And we also knew as we did acquisitions, I mean, we bought companies that clearly didn't have our culture. We bought companies that allowed people to turn the key, overload cranes, do whatever. And we would come in, and the first thing we'd do is we'd hair follicle test, which many of our competitors don't do that, and you'd lose 20 to 30% right there. And then we'd take 8 or 10 dedicated safety people and say, you're going to go hit every one of these cranes for the next 2 months, and you're going to hit every crane, you know, at least every 3 days, and we're going to get the people trained up. We're going to get them, you know, over to our side on how we do things. And we had some success with that, but we would still have situations, particularly around acquisitions, where more accidents would happen. And it also was a situation where you really had just less of a cohesive safety culture. And so then we get to, before I get to February 1st, 2014, I have to say that I hired a gentleman by the name of Craig Lunsford, who's president. They introduced me as president. I'm actually just CEO of TNT now. So I used to be CEO and president, and my wife says I'm half the man I used to be. But so we hired him in 2012, and he came from an offshore construction company. And he and I had conversations a couple times about, look, we did this acquisition, we saw a rise in accidents, or this has happened in the yard. The yard was always a situation where it just seems to be, you know, people let their guard down. You know, we're really good at running crane work out in the field with clients, and then our guys get in the yard, and whether it's complacency or horsing around or what have you, we were having injuries in the shop at times, and you honestly didn't have a set training program for people in the shop and how they could get hurt and things that they needed to do. Well, on February 1st, 2014, we had a young man that was welding plates. He was basically fabricating crane mats in our yard, and he had he had it tack welded to a welding bench, and the tack weld broke, and he was on a ladder standing next to it. And this was obviously, in hindsight, not the best way to process this work. It was something that we had not focused on. There were other issues that went on around this, but the 3,500-ton mat fell over on him and crushed him. You had 8 guys trying to get it off of him. Give me 1 second. But they weren't able to get it off of him until they got a forklift over there because it was too heavy for them to lift. And this is Kevin now. He lost his leg. He still works for us. And so this is he and I after a safety dinner one night visiting about things. The young man really couldn't handle things any better than he did. And he's been an amazing story. He works in our safety department now, and he helps with our training, and he does a great job. And he is starting to get to a situation where he can use prosthetics more, but obviously his life has changed dramatically. So at that point in time, Craig came to me and he said, look, we've got to do something different. And he knew exactly what to do because he had been through this process at his previous company. And they had hired a consultant called JMJ and came in and introduced incident and injury-free integral approach. And so it was kind of embarrassing for me, I guess, because the conversation was he was almost hesitant to come to me with this. And he knows that I just don't like consultants, and that's just not what I'm about. But immediately when he came to me, I was like, no, I want to hear more about this because what we're doing now has to be improved on. So we hired JMJ, and we'll get into what that looked like. But it started with, they gave me a sales job, and I immediately just bought off on this. I said, this is exactly what we need. We can have different cultures in Canada. We can have a different culture, in our different branches in TNT, but we have to have the same safety culture, and we have to be able to pull that together and sing from the same sheet of music. And so the first thing that we did was a 2-day commitment workshop. And we had 120 of our senior leaders come to that from basically all over North America. We launched IF leadership teams. And the IF leadership teams, we have a corporate team that meets every 2 months. We have regional teams that pull together different branches. We have branch teams. But in many respects, these guys are meeting at least once a month to go through all of the safety things and acknowledgments and appreciation and how we do things better. And it's a very programmatic approach, and a lot of good information is shared, but the team building through all that has been phenomenal. We also engage them in some leadership coaching. We have, most of our branch managers are crane operators, as I'm sure many of yours are as well, if not most, and they weren't raised necessarily to, be a leader or a manager. And through some of the coaching processes, we've really seen guys find their inner leader. It doesn't mean that they weren't leaders to begin with, but they weren't necessarily good at communicating it or expressing it. You know, we had one guy, Gary Harvey, that was just scared to death to speak in front of even his own guys. He just couldn't do it. And he's totally transformed. He's now one of the biggest voices that we have. And coming out of that commitment workshop, the biggest thing was we as a company are going to commit that we are going to stop hurting people and that it's possible. And you first have to believe that it's possible to make it happen. If you can't at least start at that point, then there's just no way it will ever get there. And then the next thing is, and if we're not, we're going to do everything possible within our power to make sure that we get to that point. So we had to build sustainability, and we no longer use JMJ. We had to do train the trainers, and we have, you know, all kind of different sessions that we do. But for example, I'm one of the trainers for the orientation, and we've trained over 2,000 employees. We have 1,500, but as you guys all know, we have temporary people come in and out, and we've trained over 2,000 people. As of 2014, when we did this, JMJ told me that I was the only CEO that had actually they'd ever seen sign up to be a trainer. And one of the things that we focused on top of me is I didn't want just our safety guys doing it. I wanted our operational leaders to be the trainers. Some of them, as they affectionately like to say, got voluntold that you're going to be a trainer in our group. And so that's what we did. And we have multiple different classes. We have an 8-hour supervisor skills training. We have the 4-hour orientation that everybody goes through, and it spread the message. And then on top of that is the leadership coaching and then the leadership teams that meet on a regular basis. And so there's two of our guys. Troy Pierce came from JMJ. I'm going to tell a story at the end about our safety professional that was working for us at the time that this happened, who ended up being no longer with us. And we hired Troy from JMJ. He was like, look, I just think what's going on at TNT is really cool, and the way you guys have built the company, but also the way you approach this and the way your senior leadership has embraced, because this IF is what he is all about. And then Bubba Murray is our branch manager in Houston, which for us is like 65 cranes and 300 employees. It's a big branch and a lot going on, and I affectionately like to say he's one of the best crane operators in the world. I mean, he's run 500, he's run 800. He didn't spend a lot of time on it, but he can run the 1,200-ton Lee Bear that we had for a period of time. And particularly Bubba, Troy came in having done consulting work with J&J, really understood, you know, so well the incident and injury-free culture. But Bubba's also another one of these guys that just his leadership skills and his communication and his relationship with his people has just gone off the charts. And the only way that this happens is if there's an unwavering commitment from the top. You know, you can't just say, okay, we're going to launch this and then we're out. And there were some people in our management that just weren't going to get there. They weren't going to buy off on it, and we had to make some changes actually just around this program. And we're going to cover each of these. This is kind of what makes it work, but we'll kind of go through each of these as we go through the presentation. But one of the things that J&J came to me with when they were selling us on embracing this work is they said, look, these are the things that most people focus on, and it's behaviors. Well, you can see a behavior. You can see what somebody's doing. You can see if somebody's riding a ball. You can see if, you know, if somebody's operating without their mats, or, you know, you can see what they're doing. You can figure out if somebody's competent or not with a few tests and things of that nature. And then you have your systems, and then the big pet peeve of mine for years had been policies and procedures. Every time something happened, it's like our clients would jump right to the policies and procedures, and we want you to write another procedure, and we want you to have, you know, the next 5 meetings, and we want you to do this, and and it just kind of goes, you know, on. And I would always step back and say, okay, I get that, so we'll comply with the clients, and we'll go set up all these new policies and procedures, and we'll send around memos, and we'll go from there. And I don't know if the number's 95% or if it's 98%, but when there's accidents, it's because somebody didn't stop when they needed to. It's because somebody made a bad decision. It's because somebody didn't raise their hand when something didn't look right. And you can always get to, if this guy would have just done this, or if this woman would have not done that, then this would not have happened. And that was one of the things that immediately sold me on this, and this is the integral approach, and it's really about the relationship to safety, the relationship between you and your people. I've always valued myself as a relationship guy, and it's more on the personal side, on the values, the commitment, responsibility, attitude, and then you really get into, morale and culture, and those things are so important to how all of this comes together. Do people feel like it is safe for them to stop work? I mean, I thought that was a great question that you asked earlier. And do they feel like you're going to get backed up if a client is pressing you too hard? And do they feel like they can stop and not get fired? And every one of our employees carries a stop work authority card. So you asked that question, and I can confidently say within our group that the answer to that is yes, and it is signed by me and has my phone number on it. Some of those calls get to be a little ridiculous, but and you do have to have the conversation. Please go through your branch manager first. So it's a much more integral approach on covering everything, because if you can't reach your employees and convince them of that, but then also understand what they're about. I mean, Hendrick used the term machismo. We call it in Texas cowboy up. And when you get the guy that's just going to get the job done no matter what, and he'll just cowboy it, it's a problem. And you really have to identify that guy, and you need to move him out of the organization. And I had always done that with top management. And what this has allowed us to do is set the expectations and move that throughout the company. I'm sorry to use the language, but what I would always say is this is about reducing the asshole factor. And if we had an asshole in management, we would get rid of him and just say this just doesn't work. And my expression was, one asshole can make the whole room stink. And so, but you really have to take that down to your operators, your riggers, your truck drivers. If you have a guy that's got a bad attitude and he's just not going to straighten up, and he causes problems and he cuts corners, you can't wait for this guy to be in a major accident. Let's just get rid of him now. We all know that we're short of people, but we just don't want to be part of what's going on with that. And once you look at it that way, and once you see the values that come out of that, and once you see the transformational change to your business, you can't go back to that. You can't not see this. And it's kind of like this picture. What most people initially see is a man and a woman standing by a lake, but then if you look at it closer, pretty sure I don't know, there's a head and face of a baby, there's the feet. So there's a baby in that picture, but it takes you a second for your eyes to adjust, but once you see it, you can't not see it. You can't go, okay, well now I'm just going to look at the people and the lake. You know that the baby's there, and you can't see it a different way. So then there's the accountability, and one of our consultants who now also works for us, J&J's not happy about all the people that we hired from them, but they liked what we had going on at TNT, and so that's worked out pretty well. But he would always make the point of, when people investigate accidents, they get to the point of, okay, now that we can point the finger at him and say, this guy did this, and this is what the problem is, and then we deal with him, and then that's kind of the end of it. We don't go through the learning, all the other things that can happen. And then the biggest thing we don't do is figure out that when we're pointing, there's three fingers pointing back at you. So I really had to step back and say, what was I doing that was causing problems? And, there were situations, as I said, if somebody turned a key, operated without their mask, they were gone. There was just no questions asked. And so I felt like I was setting the right tone from a safety standpoint. But the other thing that would happen is every time a salesman would call and say, boss, we're about to miss a 500-ton job, well, then I'm right down there in the middle of dispatch and figuring out how to move a crane from Atlanta to New Orleans, or let's wrap this job up earlier and switch this one out. And I was sending a message that every dime of incremental revenue is vastly important, and it is. And there's situations where when you get that crane puzzle to work, that's great, but then you also have to step back and say, am I also having the conversations with my people that how long has this guy been on the job? Is he too tired? Can we move this crane tonight? And making sure that there is a safety aspect in that. And then there's the situation of you can't always have, you can't accomplish everything. We had one particular client in South Texas, and I've been having the conversation with them for a period of time that, look, you aren't letting us plan these jobs soon enough. I mean, 30 crane turnarounds are hard. And when we're getting a list from you 2 and 3 weeks ahead of time, that's bad. But then when we open up the unit and we don't have people that are doing this on a regular basis other than you, and you go, okay, now we need 5 more cranes and 8 more cranes, and whatever the situation may be, and we need it right now, it's just it's just a disaster, because when we get into turnaround season in September and October, or in February and March, all the resources are tapped out. And when you're going in last minute hiring, you're just hiring the very bottom of the barrel, and we would have issues that would happen. And I would have the conversation with the plant manager, and had it multiple times, and her answer to me at one point was, we've got to improve some of the things we do. I admit that our turnaround planning is an unmitigated disaster, except there was a F word right between unmitigated and disaster. And I'm like, well, at least she admits it. And so we go into our next turnaround, fall of 2015, and same thing, we get our list late. A little earlier this time, but it's okay. And they open up one of the units, and it's a lot worse than they thought. And they said, okay, we need 8 more cranes and 32 more people. And so I called her up and said, look, I just don't think we can safely do it. And she had an awesome reaction. She goes, look, I'd rather you tell me that, and I'd rather you do it safely, and this is the kind of partnership that we need to have. Well, that thing was in really bad shape, and it ended up going 45 to 60 days, just depending on the cranes. And we probably gave up $2 million worth of work around that, but it validated, and it sent a message to our people that their safety and us doing things the right way is much more important than every dime of revenue. Because when we have an accident, we all know, first of all, the personal issues that it can cause, for families and everything else. But then it's also a huge brain drain for us as management, with all the different meetings and follow-on and all the issues that come out of that. And so one of the things to say about IF is, it's not a technical fix. It's not something that you can just do. And it's an everyday process. It's knowing all your employees, and you reach different people in different ways. And so it's an adaptive challenge that you continue to work on. As we like to say, it's really more of a journey, not a goal. And the results for us, now what JMJ had experienced for years and years and years with multiple companies, is that the numbers got worse before they got better, because most people were hiding injuries. Well, our injuries went down 40% after the first year. Now, the reports of near misses and other things shot way up. We have 100% confidence now that with all this communication, our people understand that we have to have the reporting of near misses, and that we're going to investigate those just as seriously, because sometimes a near miss, is 2 or 3 inches away from being a fatality. I mean, it's not just, well, nothing happened, so it's okay. I mean, if a jib falls off a crane and almost hits somebody in the head, you really need to figure out that's a serious situation, and somebody could have died. And so the severity of our incidents are declining. We did have, and I'm not saying that we don't have issues. We had a bad one earlier this year, and it's not a good situation. But overall, the severity is declining, and it's declining rapidly. And as I said earlier, the managers are becoming leaders, but it's really been a fantastic integration tool, and not only just integration of, as we've done acquisitions and bringing those management teams together, but even just integration of legacy TNT guys that have worked together for years, and creating a better relationship and better line of communication between those guys, which has made us a better company. And so, keeping it alive, we have to be who we say we are. I mean, if I go in and say that I'm set on this as safety, and then I go driving out of the yard at 60 miles an hour looking at my cell phone, that's not it. I mean, and it has to be in your personal life. It has to be in your business life. Treat each other with dignity and respect, show care and concern, and we're going to hit on these a little bit more. And then what do we accept today that will be unacceptable tomorrow? And I thought that was great. It kind of really dovetails well into what Hendrik was saying. But it used to be standard that people wouldn't tie off at heights. It used to be fine for people to ride the ball, and that was an acceptable way to get up on a platform or what have you. What are we doing now that we shouldn't be doing in the future if we really wanted to be safer? And so those are some of the questions and conversations that we have. And when we talk about dignity and respect and dealing with people, it really bothers me at times that there's so many companies that they talk about culture and how you do things, but it's just crap. I mean, there's no actions behind it. Well, when we had Hurricane Harvey, we had 35 families that their homes got severely damaged, and in some cases, they entirely lost their homes. And we had many competitors that they sent their employees home, because basically Houston, Beaumont, Corpus, they were shut down for 10 days. There was just no work being processed anywhere. And so several of our competitors just sent everybody home and said, we'll call you when we need you. We kept everybody on 40 hours a week. We said, you're on 40 hours a week whether you stay at home or whether you come into the office. But if you can come into the office, and we had 70 to 90 people out cleaning people's homes up. And so this is Craig, our president. The guy next to him is a mechanic. The guy next to Craig is Eli, our 500-ton operator. And so I don't know if you can tell from the picture, but we had to cut sheetrock out all the way up to the ceiling. He has little kids. We had to basically throw away all his kids' clothes, toys, everything. It was a tough situation. But going out and physically doing this was, some of the most uplifting stuff I've ever done. It was really cool. So here's me at Ray DeMint's house, and as you can see, I sweat through my jeans. So we were out there getting after it. The guy standing next to me is my brother-in-law who works for us, and he's quite funny, or as we would say in America, he's a wise ass. And so this was the second day. The day before this, I was out in Corpus cleaning up homes. And then Philip comes in after about an hour and a half, and we're just busting it. We're ripping up wood floor. We're tearing out cabinets. We're doing all this stuff. And he goes, I sure like this a lot better when you weren't here yesterday. And I said, why is that? And he goes, because I got to supervise. I just go sit in the truck for 30, 45 minutes and come in and check on these guys, which is just absolute bull because he was in there working the entire time, but it was pretty funny. And so one of the other things that we do around incident and injury-free is we set up a vision statement. And I'm not going to read all these to you, but I'm going to tell you a story while I let you process this. When we kicked this off, and after Kevin got hurt, a few months later, our safety director came to Craig and I and said he was going to leave. And we had hired him from an engineering company, but he had done industrial services work before. And we asked him why, and he said, we got the possibility that somebody could die. We could kill somebody. I'm like, yeah, it's a crane company. You're absolutely right. And he goes, I just don't think that I can deal with that. And so we're immediately like, yeah, we're not even talking to you anymore about staying. You need to go do whatever you're going to do. But then the conversation started evolving between Craig and I, and then when Troy came on board and then our upper management, that's why we're here. That's our responsibility. It's our commitment. It's our covenant to those people. And we have to do this to make our business and our industry safer. And if we all approach it with that level and up our safety game, and I've shared a little bit with you of what we're trying to do to up ours, we can make our industry better. And the crane business is phenomenal. I wish, like many of you, I'd been in it my entire career. But the last 10 years have been great. But as long as we're getting people hurt, there's room for improvement, and that's what we need to do. And thank you, and I appreciate your time.